Well, hello again, good people. Mad for Steam back, and this is the build of Kit 1. But before we do that, please have a very quick look at the entire kit. Now, if you've seen the unboxing video, brilliant, but you can see this for the first time. If you haven't, then there should be a link up there, and you can go back and visit that. So please, if you do, like and subscribe. However, before we get on to the machinations of Kit 1, I've got some important messages from the previous video which we need to recorrect, but even more, before then, I've got a big thank you. So my channel's 5 years old, and each video maybe gets between 50 and 300 views, with a total watch time of maybe 3 hours for each video, and yes, 20 subscribers, which is fairly tragic. But I have to tell you, this last video, which was the unboxing video, has already hit 11,600 views with a total watch time of 1,000 hours and 600 subscribers. Now, I'm not pretending to be Mr. Beast with over 5 million, but we've all got to start somewhere. So an absolute massive thank you. Keep it going, and let's see if we can keep that momentum rolling. Now, the first note from the unboxing video was I got the operation of the whistle completely wrong. So if we take a look at it here, I thought that this whistle would be held open by the pressure in the boiler. No, it's not. If you look closely, you can see there's a spring action there. That is what activates the whistle, and that is exactly the same on my Gauge 3 mallard that I've got from Kingscale. Again, you may recall from the unboxing video, I did have a concern about this sellotape being wrapped around this cladding, and when I pulled it off, I was lifting some of this material. Now, I did talk to Mike Pavey, and he said, don't worry, all the boilers are like that, and he's serviced these. They may be 10 years old, and he's never seen any blackening or any melting of the sellotape. Now, I get that, but the OCD in me isn't totally sold on that idea, because I know it's going to be covered by the boiler cladding. I'd kind of like to see it more like this section here, because that's going to be covered. You know it's not going to get hurt, and it's glued to the boiler. Now, the jury's out on that one. We'll see how we go with the build. Now, you may recall in the unboxing video I said I had no idea what all this pipework was, but thanks to the very vibrant YouTube community, I knew there would be somebody who would help me out. And they are called Railway Mechanical Engineer 4587. What a natty title you've got there. And we're going to put their reply on screen. They say, those bits sticking out of the boiler tubes are superheater flues, which will raise the steam temperature considerably above the actual initial boiler temperature, which also increases the local's power. So thank you ever so much to Railway Mechanical Engineer 4587. Now, these two components came from box 8, and again, here's another correction. I got it half right. I identified this component here as the connecting rod to connect the two cylinder drain cocks, and indeed we have working drain cocks. But I thought this would go somewhere here. No, it doesn't do that at all. This is actually nothing to do with the drain cocks. It is the brake cylinder, this bit, and this is connected to a frame stretcher. So when you bolt it in between the frames, you put the whole unit in as one lump. So these are the tools you're going to need for Kit 1. I've amassed this selection of BA and metric spanners over the years, but you won't need these. Now, I've had a look and I may be wrong, but I think you only need 3 tools. You need a 3mm nut spinner or nut runner. I got that from Expo. And a 5.5mm nut runner, which is slightly bigger. Now, if you haven't got these, don't worry, I'll put a link up now to where you can get them on Temu. which is probably the cheapest. You also need a 2.5mm Allen key spanner. Now, don't confuse these with your typical Allen keys, because they'll turn about as much as a barge would turn on a windy day. They're pretty tragic, but this is a 2.5mm. You'll get a set of these, and again, I'll throw the link up now. These are where I got mine from on Teamit. Now, this is purely optional, and I'll tell you why I think it's a good idea. Buy yourself a digital micrometer. This has been set because I'm going to put this across the frames. You'll see a cutaway of that, and just turn it on, and you've got an accurate measurement. Now, again, you can get these on Temu for a £5 or £6. Don't be compelled to buy one of these. This is made of blancmange, and it's totally rubbish, so we'll get rid of that. Now, I'm getting ahead of myself here, and we are going to talk about thread locker, but you may need some. The jury's out on that. I want your comments on that, because I'm not really sure where to go with it. You certainly will need some hot spot fire cement, and you will probably need some gasket maker, which is just a black gloop. I haven't bought anything special. This is the prized version from Yonglian, that well-known gasket maker Chinese company. And who wants Loctite when you can get Lulifel? I think Lulifel rocks. Now, this is a Korean work surface. I do not have plate glass here. Silver Crest recommend you build up the chassis on plate glass, but this is the best I've got. And I thought I would check the level, because if this is level, then surely the frames will be. So it's level there, and it's level there. Now, if you don't have this spirit level, maybe you've got a couple of these. These are from my turntables. I love hi-fi, and you can position one at 90 degrees to the other, and as you can see, you're working on a level surface. That's really important. A bit like the foundations of your house. If your house isn't built properly from the ground up, however nice it's going to be a bit wonky, and we don't want a wonky chassis. Now, I know we're pushing the envelope here. This is Saturday when we're making the first video for the kit. This arrived yesterday and it's hot off the press. There's 160 pages. You can see all these schematics, the CAD/CAM drawings, and there are also extensive build notes. And towards the back, you've got every stage of the build. So even if you're mildly dyslexic like I am, you can figure out where everything goes just by looking at the pictures. I reckon this is the loco equivalent of painting by numbers. So before I start putting the frames together, I wanted to take a few bits off the buffer beams. Now, firstly, these come in an accessory box, which you haven't seen before. And these are the couplings, which are lovely. And they go into a slot in the hook. And I told you before that this vac pipe is fitted to the front buffer beam, but this one is loose, and that goes there. Rather than having this one fitted, I'm going to knock it. They're really resilient, but I'm going to be clumsy, and with my ham-fisted hands, let's take it away. I wanted to get these off the buffer beams anyway. This is how they come in the kit, and they're perfectly fine. But to my eye, those pipes, they're a little bit glossy, and I think they should be brass, probably chrome, and very weathered. So what I took the opportunity of doing, that's how they come. But what I've done is I've painted it in a matte black, which looks far better, and just picked out the detail of the connections in Humbrol gold. And so let the build begin. The first thing we do is we put the buffer beams on. I've only secured it with 2 on opposite corners. I've always been told to do that. And I'm not going to do them ridiculously tight, but I'm just going to nip them up using my 5.5mm. And then the other ones should drop in there like that. So that's the last screw going in on the right hand side, and they're connected, not too tight, leave everything loose at the moment. Now notice the outer edge of the frame has this gasket here, and that's where the cylinders go on to. It would be fairly difficult, I guess you could get them the wrong way around, but the clue is there's a handle there, and I don't know if that's in shot, but there's that bit sticking out, so make sure these are to the outside. Now this is where I'm going to go a little bit off-piste with the instructions. They do say fit the rear buffer beam first, you can see that, but then when you come to fit the brake piston, which goes somewhere in there, they ask you to remove those so this bit will go through the hole. Well, Mike Pavey, Silver Crest, look away now because I'm going to do it slightly differently. So we're not going to fit the buffer beam. I've loosely bolted a centre bolt here for the piston, which goes downwards incidentally. You can't put a bolt there, otherwise you'll compress the frames. One side of this assembly is actually fitted into that boss. Then hopefully, I don't know, oops, move it out of the way. I don't know how much you can see, but with the frame, look at that. So now, when I've bolted this up, this obviously isn't square, but when that's bolted up square, and I add the buffer beam, this should hold this whole assembly in place. Okay, I lied, there is another tool, and I'm sorry, I don't have them in a metric reference. This is an 8BA. I'm really sorry about the brand, but King Dick, they make great tools, if you excuse the pun. So this is the main central frame stretcher. That's the last bolt going in. Again, everything is loose. We'll level it off in a bit. Well, that's the exhaust pipe in. I'm not going to film it. I mean, putting screws in is like watching paint dry. And these wonderful Allen key drivers that I mentioned. Yeah, I had to resort to my Blancmange Allen key because, as you can see, that don't go in. These do. They are a fiddle, I'm not going to lie. It takes time. Take your time. Nip them up nicely, not too tight. Leave it all loose. You can always go around afterwards. We'll do that when we've leveled the entire chassis and the frame. So, did you spot the obvious mistake, people? This is the exhaust. Now, what happens is any steam comes from the cylinders. I'll use my little bamboo stick. Up there, up the exhaust. So it needs to point up to the chimney, not down towards the track. A stupid error on my part. I refer to the drawings, so there you go. What do I say? I make mistakes, so you don't have to. So we've turned the chassis and frame upside down to fit the axle pump. Now the instructions say to undo this bolt and the one below it to take these pipes off to fit the axle pump. The problem is these pipes and the bolts have seemed to have been sort of glooped in with something or other, probably some sort of fire weld, and I've tried spanners. I even tried a wrench on it. I didn't want to damage it, so we've decided to leave those on the basis it came apart at the factory, so it should go back together here. I'm guessing that the outlet, or even maybe the inlet, goes through this hole in the central frame spacer. If not, we'll have to take it off, but for now we know it's on, so really all that's left to do is to spin up the last bolt, and that part's done. So the final spacer to go in is the rear spacer, and this will drop in here and you'll bolt it either side. However, if you look, there are 4 chrome bolts. They are going to need to come out and they'll bolt down through this assembly. So what I'm going to do is, again, you're not going to watch me do it, we're going to use a 7mm driver here. I should have used this before. I forgot I had it in stock. I didn't need that BA driver from King Dick Tools, but it was worth a laugh anyway. Now, this obviously needs to line up perfectly, and there's a little bit of sway in the brake pump there. So I always go opposites to secure things in. Keep these loose so that the frames will naturally settle, and then having my famous bamboo skewer, you can see that the two bolts that we haven't yet put in will line up perfectly. So I'm going to put those in now. So the final part is to put the rear buffer beams on, which is what the instructions told me to do in the first place. But I'm glad I didn't, because now everything's tight. These fit in much, much easier. So all that I need to do is put 4 bolts aside to secure the beams in place. Now, I'm not going to bolt these next assemblies in. Again, it's so long, so let's just show you where they go. This is the front tank support, and that bolts in from underneath. These next 2 pieces work opposite to each other. They're the gear frame supports. They bolt in from underneath. There are the bolts. And from this side as well. So that one will sit there. Now notice the rear frame support is slightly a different shape. So your front one has got a level top. This one has got a fluted edge there, so they'll drop in there. What we'll do is we'll bolt those up, and then we'll just move things on. The front steps are really very easy, but they are handed, so make sure that they point backwards so that this bit doesn't overhang the buffer. There are 2 bolts, and you just bolt them down, and that's where they stay. Axle guards next. The front pair are longer than the rear, and these bits taper outwards, and the curve goes towards the middle of the loco. And here's the rear ones. Again, they're the shorter ones, taper towards the inside, and each one is bolted in with these 4 small bolts. The toolbox simply bolts in with 4 bolts to the near side of the rear frame, adjacent to the rear buffer beam, just there. And just in front of the near side toolbox is the rear sandbox, only held on the 2 bolts there. You can't fit it the other way around, otherwise it would foul the toolbox. Now the front sandboxes are completely different to the rear. This little bit here, that's slightly longer, but these fit inside the frames, not outside the frames like the rears, and they bolt from that way, whereas the rears are the opposite. We've got a quick 3-in-1 shot for you here. These are the footplate supports, one on either side. They go on fine. Now, I've already put the rear sandbox on here, and this is to the off side, the rear being that way. That's what the instructions told me to do. However, if that goes on before this bit, which is the reversal lower pivot bracket, you can't get your screws, your nut spinner in there to tighten the bolts. So my advice is, don't worry about that. That will go on anyway. Put this on. So put the reversal lower pivot bracket on first, then add your rear sandbox. Wow. Well, we're almost there. That's been a mammoth build. And these are the last 2 pieces. They're handed, but you can't get them wrong. So there are 3 bolts that go in, and they won't go in the wrong way round. I would love to be able to tell you what they are, but we've been through the instructions. They're not photographed, and they're not mentioned. Some sort of boiler support or running board support, I don't know. So maybe Silver Crest can look into that and give us a steer, or maybe one of you good people can tell me what they are. But apart from the levelling, that is pretty much job done. Now remember I told you earlier that it's got to be level. If the chassis and frames are not level, then everything's going to be on the conch, as they say. So the first thing I wanted to do is put my digital micrometer over, and we'll put it in there. There's, a little bit of slop, nothing to worry about. There, similar amount, and there, similar amount. So as far as the parallel frames go, I think we'll call that a win, but we do need to check how level the whole thing is. So this is not ideal. It's chopped up on 2 bits of wood, but I know they're the same. Ideally, I could do without any paraphernalia down here to get in the way. But I think it's going to be good enough. So we'll check the level there. And that's spot on. And then longitudinally. And that's spot on. So, yeah, I think we have a level and a straight chassis. So we know the frames are level. We know that from a horizontal angle, they're all flat and square. One last thing to check is with the T-square. Yeah, that's pretty much bang on. So they work in that direction and they work in that direction. I think I can call that job done. I mean, this was a massive build. Not really challenging, apart from a couple of bits and one bit that I got wrong, but a fantastic start to a great kit. I can't wait to do the next one. So hearty congratulations to Silver Crest when you think that 6 months ago I was presented with their test chassis, which is very good. But then, wow, after today, we've ended up with a full working chassis and a frame, and it's heavier. It fits together really well. I had no issues with misaligned bolts. There are no captive nuts. Everything has been reamed through, so the bolts just screw into the frame. The only issues I've had is my own mistake putting that up the wrong way. That was stupid. And who knows what these bits are. So answers on a postcard, or leave a message in the comments if you do know. Now the total build time, about 4.5 hours, but don't forget that is including us filming it and my numpty factor, because I'm by no means an experienced model engineer. So thank you for sticking with me, and thank you for sticking with the build. Please leave loads of comments. And I'm going to leave you now with another Kingscale loco, because everybody's got to have a bit of a steam fix, haven't they? So here is my Gauge 3 Mallard, also from Kingscale, in steam for your delight and delectation. Until next time, toot toot, see you then.